Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on Zoom and on social media. My name is Kadir Üstün. I'm the Executive Director at the CETA Foundation at Washington, D.C. Today, we are hosting a high-level panel discussion on the future of U.S.-Turkey defense relationship. The US and Turkey are two NATO allies with long-standing security ties and an overall robust defense partnership, which became more complicated lately. In recent years, Turkey has ramped up its defense capabilities against regional threats and also proceeded to acquire missile defense systems from Russia after failed talks with the US and the EU. US Congress has sought to remove Turkey from the F-35 project due to procurement of S-400 systems as well as Turkey's military operations in northern Syria. The Trump administration sought to find a middle ground as Turkey indicated its openness to purchase US systems such as Patriot systems. Turkey's nationally produced weapons systems have already demonstrated their effectiveness in the region, and the country continues to seek cooperation with the US based on common interests. At SETA DC, we wanted to discuss these dynamics and explore ways for two countries to cooperate better on common defense. We have two excellent, distinguished guests to discuss these issues. I can't think of better names than these two to explore better cooperation between the two countries. I'd like to welcome both. We have President Ismail Demir and Admiral James Stavridis. President Demir is the president at Defense Industries of Turkey, which is the Turkish government's defense procurement agency. This agency grew from managing about 60 projects in 2000 to about 750 projects today. About half of them launched in the last 5 years. These include nationally produced tanks, unarmed and armed drones, national corvette program, national warplanes, and under Professor Dr. Demir's leadership, under his leadership, uh, the organization supports R&D efforts in defense in Turkey as well. Um, he has served as senior technical officer, vice CEO in Turkish Airlines, and later as general manager of Turkish Technique. He was appointed in April 2014 as the head of the Undersecretariat of Defense Industries, which was renamed in 2018 as the as a presidency and brought under the Turkish presidency's office in July 2018. Professor Demir has a long aviation career and holds a PhD from the Department of Mechanical Engineering at Washington State University. And, and obviously, they have a much longer bio, but I don't have time for that. Admiral James Stavridis is the same thing for him as well. He has a long bio. I'll introduce him shortly. He's an operating executive focused on advising Carlyle's executive team and investment professionals on geopolitical and national security issues. Previously, Admiral Stavridis served as the 12th Dean of the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University. He's a retired four-star officer in the U.S. Navy. He led the NATO alliance and global operations from 2009 to 2013 as Supreme Allied Commander with responsibility for Afghanistan, Libya, the Balkans, Syria, counter-piracy, and cybersecurity. He also served as commander of U.S. Southern Command with responsibility for all military operations in Latin America from 2006 to 2009. Admiral Stavridis holds more than 50 medals, including 28 from foreign nations. I'm going to stop here. They have long resumes. We feel privileged to have them. My colleague, Kılıç Kanat, who is our research director at SETA DC, will be moderating today's discussion. So I'll hand it over to him now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming, gentlemen. Professor Demir, the format would be, I will ask 10 to 15 minutes introductory remarks from both of you. And following that, we will have Q&A session. For the audience on in Zoom right now, and for those who follow us on Twitter and Facebook, you can write your questions on the comment section or as a reply for the Twitter feed. And my assistants will collect the questions and I will try to address all of those questions. We have approximately 1 hour, so we will start immediately right now. Professor Demir, can we start with you?
Okay, thank you very much again, gentlemen. It is very nice being with you. When we say introductory remarks, maybe I'll try to make it short. But in general, when we want to talk about the future of U.S.-Turkey defense cooperation, we must look back, and it has a long history. This military collaboration and also being long-term ally in NATO and have a long history in Korean War, etc. When I was in the U.S., some folks were older when they heard that I am from Turkey, and they used to always tell me the stories, especially the military guys, about the Korean War and how heroic was Turkish military's activity over there. And so when we look back, it started after the Second World War, and after the Marshall Program, we had some military equipment coming to Turkey. And for a long time, we had trusted that U.S. a good ally, until the early 70s when Turkey started operations in Cyprus. And I guess it was become a wake-up call for Turkey in general that we cannot always trust others, even if they are so-called allies. So then there started activities about developing our own national defense industry. But the steps were a little bit slow. And so the establishment of my agency goes back to 1985, where President Özal had that vision that there must be a special agency to take care of the defense industrial collaboration and the defense industry development in Turkey. And we came today, and there were different phases in the past, and we started with the FMS cases, direct procurement from the US. And one of the landmark projects was F-16 project in Turkey, and the F-16 assembly line established in Turkey with Lockheed Martin. It was a good project, and it was really helpful and improved our relations in defense collaboration. Later on, different tanks and armored vehicles and weapons. We had many military equipment from the US, but that wake-up call was that really had an important mark in our background. And it goes back to my early days of my studentship. And actually, I had grown up as being an ideal to have a national industry in general in Turkey. So until the later times, we thought our relations were not that bad, but U.S. operations in Iraq and their policies are not exactly aligned with Turkey. And on our regret, we wish that U.S. side would have understood Turkish concerns about the policies that they carried out in northern Iraq and even now northern Syria. So it started a drift in our relations in terms of feelings. And then the early days of my position here in this agency, I realized that there are some systems that were not very easy to acquire from the US. And even before I took this position, and there was some requests from the US about the drones and etc., and we were not able to acquire them. And then comes the other weapons and some smart bombs and cameras, etc. None of them were positively answered until the time that we started our own production. So we had kind of bitter memories about our relations with the US. although we always thought and supported the idea that we must have a strong military collaboration with the US, including the defense industry. And in many occasions, actually, we had good examples of collaboration with the US and with GE and some other companies. Up to a certain degree, this is a win-win relation that I thought both sides were happy. And the landmark of it was the F-35 project, that Turkey was one of the partner countries, and things were going well. But when it comes to S-400 issue, the relations become tenser. And so anyway, when we talked about last 6 or 7 years that some of the weapon systems and smart bombs and cameras were blocked from the US side, it was already not going well anyway. But this S-400 issue become really a deal breaker in a sense. But we still think that there is a future if both sides see the synergy and the benefit of having collaboration in the military side, in the field, in operations, and in the industry. There is a lot to win for both sides. US as a superpower sometimes think that they can impose their will and wish and policies anywhere in the world. But if that policy is not right for that geographical location, like in Turkey, northern Iraq, and northern Syria, the policies were definitely wrong. If they had listened Turkish advice and Turkish policies, that region would have been in peace for a long time, and our relations could have been in a better position. However, for the future, we are optimistic, and we are always for the relations, for improving the relations. And both sides should respect each other's sovereignty and national interests. And it should not be forgotten that the region, the troubled region, is our neighbors. So northern Syria, Iraq and Syria, we have been suffering whatever has been going on over there. We have been suffering from them. So this is a fact. And then our ally, US, should really respect our concerns and listen to us. And of course, we are ready to listen to their concerns and their national interests and security issues. But if we had listened each other carefully and respect each other's concerns, I think we can have a better future. And I am definitely optimistic about it.
Thank you very much, Professor Demir. Admiral, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and a pleasure to be with all of you today, those listening, but particularly to have a dialogue with Mr. President, with Professor Dr. Demir. It's my honor to be included. Well, I want to begin where you began, which is the Korean War. My father was a US Marine Corps officer. Obviously, you can gather from my last name that I'm Greek American, although my grandfather actually came to the United States from the city of Izmir. So my father is Greek American. He is a young officer in the Marine Corps, and he goes to the Korean War. He is in command of a platoon of US Marines, and on his flank is a Turkish unit. The two of them worked perfectly together. And my father came back from the Korean War with stories about the courage and the loyalty and the combat capability of those Turkish soldiers who fought alongside him. So I'm very happy, Dr. Demir, that you began with the Korean War and began with this long history of cooperation between the United States and Turkey. So let me flash forward, if I may, in my own life. So I end up going to the Naval Academy, long career in the Navy, and then I become the Supreme Allied Commander of NATO. The first capital I visited was Ankara. Why? Certainly it would have been very tempting for me to go to Athens, to go to Berlin, to go to London, to go to France. I went to Ankara. I went there because I recognized then, this was in 2009, and I recognize today the critical importance of Turkey to the NATO alliance. It is, as we all know, the second largest military in the alliance. It is a military of tremendous capability, a high degree of professionalism. And during those years, by the way, I worked with the current Minister of Defense, then General, now Minister, Hulusi Akar, and I hope you will give him my friendship and respect when you have your next meeting with him, Dr. Demir. So during those 4 years as Supreme Allied Commander, I had an excellent opportunity to watch the Turkish armed forces in action. And in every place in the alliance, everywhere I went, I saw the Turkish armed forces, highly capable. In Afghanistan, for example, they ran the regional center around Kabul. This was in the period of time when we had 150,000 troops under my command there. I always felt secure and safe, and I felt the Turkish presence in Kabul, for example. When I would go to the Balkans, where Turkey has a long, rich, and complicated history, I would often see the Turkish soldiers performing superbly in Kosovo. And when you think of the history involved there, it's a credit to Turkey that they stepped up to that alliance mission. When we had the Libyan operation in 2011, Turkey was a full participant in that. Of the 28 nations in NATO, many chose not to participate. Turkey stood up and was part of the arms embargo, was part of the air operations, was highly capable a member of the alliance in that regard. You mentioned counter-piracy. There's nothing an admiral likes better than chasing pirates. And I am proud to say the Turkish Navy performed extremely well throughout that period on those missions. So the Professor Demir, Dr. Demir, is absolutely right to point out the professionalism, the length of time of the history that is involved here, and it's absolutely key for the United States, but also very much so for NATO. So let's come to the present. And let me tell you why I think Turkey remains vital to this alliance. And then, yes, let's talk about some of the points of friction that exist today. First and foremost, the geography of Turkey is crucial to the NATO alliance and therefore fundamental to the United States. As we all know, we have a significant capability, for example, only one example, in Incirlik. We have a major portion of the land warfare component of the alliance is in the city from which my grandfather emigrated, from Izmir today. So Turkey remains geographically extremely important. And also, because of its military and its capabilities that exist today, it's a fundamental part of NATO's combat power. Thirdly, for the exact reasons that Professor Dr. Demir mentioned, the Turkish arms industry, which he proudly leads, continues to demonstrate its ability to produce high-quality combat systems, including, for example, unmanned systems, which are being used with strong effect on missions ranging from Libya through, of course, into Syria and in counterterrorism operations along the southeast border of Turkey. So that armament industry is a powerful and important part of this story. And then fourth, although the Turkish economy has had its challenges of late, it is a vibrant, highly capable economy with an educated workforce, and using PPP measurements, GDP puts it around 12th, maybe 13th largest in the world. It has a vibrant and growing population, 83 million. So as an economy, Turkey is crucial. And I'll conclude this portion of my remarks by saying simply that occasionally people would say to me when I was NATO commander, "Oh yeah, Admiral, you are correct. Turkey is very important. It's a bridge between East and West." And I would correct them. Turkey is not a bridge. It is much more important than simply a bridge. Turkey is a center of gravity unto itself because of the size of the country, the economics of the country, the military capability of the country, and its membership in the NATO alliance. It is a fundamental center of gravity, and we ought to recognize that as we deal with Turkey. So all of that, let's face it, is pretty much good news. And I think strategically, I agree with Professor Dr. Demir that I'm optimistic about future relations between Turkey and the United States, Turkey and the alliance. I believe that we have some tactical differences that we need to overcome in order to have the strategic future together that I believe is very important for my nation and for the alliance. And I think, in my view, I'm not a Turk, obviously, but I would hope that Turkey would view it as important as well. So I know we'll get more into this in questions and answers, but because the Professor Doctor mentioned the S-400, let me simply crack open the conversation by saying my belief continues to be we can find a technical solution to this challenge, and that what we need are high-level technical working groups who can look at the fundamental concerns that the alliance and the United States have, which are well known to all of us, about the permeability, the ability of information to flow from S-400 in the environment in which we would be operating the F-35. You may not agree with it, but it's a serious concern for the United States and for the alliance. So are there technical solutions we can apply? And thus, I think we need to get that conversation out of its emotional content and get it into a technical approach, which could recognize that Turkey has made a choice. They've purchased the S-400. That's a reality. How are we going to accommodate keeping them inside the F-35 program? How are we going to avoid bleeding information out of the S-400 systems about NATO air defenses, about the F-35 capabilities? Those are concerns we have. There may be technical solutions. And then I'll also add on this, I think it is appropriate to continue the conversation about, are there other systems that might be of use to Turkey, other air defense systems? I don't think we're going to have time to go back in history and pull apart whether there were offers or counter offers or whether other systems were not available. To use an American sports image, let's make it a football image. Let's, as in soccer, let's play the ball from where it is on the field now. And that means finding answers and solutions. And fundamentally, and I'll close with this, we should recognize we have strategic capabilities, we have strategic interests that are important and positive for both sides of this conversation. What we have are technical and tactical disagreements that I'm cautiously optimistic we can solve if we take a position of how can we fix this problem. And I'll close with that note of optimism and return the floor to Kilic, our moderator.
Thank you very much, Admiral. And I had more general questions, but since you started S-400, this is the elephant in the room for the defense industry right now. Most of the debates are taking place in regards to S-400. And you mentioned the technical solution for that. And I want to go back to Professor Demir and ask him, I know that Turkey offered this at least 2 times with in a conversation between President Trump and President Erdogan. This issue came forward, but then it was ignored. So what was the Turkey's offer in regards to technical solution? What did it entail? And does the agreement, S-400 agreement with Russia, has any article that impediment that kind of a technical solution with the United States, especially in regards to F-35, of course?
Okay, this is all along what we have been telling to the US side. Okay, this is the fact on the table that we have the system. However, even leave alone F-35, but for our national entire defense system, okay, we are putting something in, and we are very careful for our own sake first, then NATO alliance sake, that to contain that system, so that it can operate stand alone, and also all this IFF and all the integration should be done by us, by Turkish side, and all threat library, etc., should be put out by ourselves, and it should be in our control. And so we thought we have been careful enough to really comfort the alliance members. And moreover, we told to the US side several times that if you have some additional concerns, if you can alert us some backdoors or whatever concerns you have, let us know, let us discuss. We are ready to take precautions against that. And we should not forget that Russian side as well was concerned about the system itself. And on the table, we had this conversation many times that, okay, how come they will trust Turkey as a NATO member and to give that system, and how they were really uneasy about it. So as a nation who would honor its signature in both sides to alliance and to the acquiring the Russian system, that we must honor to protect each other's interest and to make sure that any leakage did not happen to either side. And so we had committed that we will take any necessary measure to do this. And on top of it, we told the US side that if you thought that we had been short in some depth of knowledge, whatever you name it, if you have more things that you know and you have concerns, let us know. Let us work together to prevent any leakage, any potential risk that would be happening to F-35 or any other thing. And we had made this offer so many times, but the approach from the other side was that they know better. They know better than us, better than anybody else, and they are sure, they are convinced 100%, and they don't need to convince us, and they don't need to work with us to convince us. But we said, okay, forget about convincing. Let us work together to make anything that create a leak or risk. But it went to deaf ears, unfortunately, and still this is on the table. We are talking about it. And this is very, very unfortunate from our side that we were not able to make this to be listened by the other side. I'm still holding the same position. If any party in the US side is willing to sit down and talk about it, and so we may, oversee something or overlook something, we may forget whatever, or we had some short of knowledge at some areas, whatever you name it. Let us discuss it, It is anything that would hurt alliance or will hurt us. And as a nation with a partner in F-35 program, how can one would assume that we'll agree to leak any information related to the F-35 to the other side? It is, first of all, from the intention point of view, I don't think that anybody will suspect our intention. And then it comes to technical capability. If you think that there is something technical to be worked, we are ready to work on that.
So you think that it is still not too late, given the main parts of the S-400 is delivered to Turkey, it is not too late to start this technical conversation?
It is not even asked to us what measures we have been taking and what are the conditions we put on the agreement to make sure that any risk did not happen. And there's no conversation at all about the subject. Of course, it's not late because, if you don't know what is the main concern, or if the other party did not know what measures we have been taking to make sure that there's no risk. So it is just two sides or sitting on table and no dialogue at all, just holding a position that, okay, US side says we are sure that there is a risk, we are sure that there will be leakage, and period. There's no other discussion. They'll stop this because they know better. Okay, they know better, but let us know about
it. Thank you very much, Professor Demir. And I started to receive so many questions about this issue. We will probably come back to F-35 and S-400 issue. But Admiral, there is a question for you. It says, Dear Admiral, do your keynote of today reflect the vision of US Army about Turkey, or is it just your personal opinion? And I want to bring a second part of this. It was a couple of years ago that there were some reports from prominent journalists stating that there is a disagreement within the US, some of the two different commands of the US military in regards to the relations with Turkey. Literally, it is EUCOM and CENTCOM. And especially in Stuttgart, there was meetings about the Manbij roadmap. And many people at that point argued that it was basically with the intervention of NATO command and EU command of the US military that made it possible. Do you see within the US military that kind of a divergence of opinions in regards to its relations with Turkey?
Well, first of all, my appearance today reflects my personal views. I am not here in any way, shape, or form representing the US government, US Army, or any other entity. My views, however, are certainly informed by my experiences and my conversations with many senior active duty leaders. So let's begin with how Turkey is viewed from the US military. The commander of US European Command, who wears two hats, both as commander of European Command in Stuttgart, as you mentioned, Kilic, but also that same individual is the Supreme Allied Commander of NATO with the headquarters in Mons. That officer who holds both of those posts is in charge of the military-to-military relationship between the two entities, between the United States and Turkey in his EUCOM hat, and in his normal role as Supreme Allied Commander for the alliance. U.S. Central Command, as you all know, those of us on the call, but for all of the listeners, U.S. Central Command, which has its headquarters, strangely, in Tampa, Florida, is in charge of military-to-military relationships throughout the Middle East, broadly speaking. So here's the answer to your question. U.S. European Command has formal authority for the military-to-military relationship. However, everything that officer does impacts the work of his fellow leader, the commander of U.S. Central Command, because that officer is in charge of what's happening in Syria, in Iraq, in Afghanistan. So the two of them are in constant conversation about a wide variety of topics. And certainly the topic of Turkey comes up at different times in the conversation. I will tell you from my personal experience, when I was in the job as Commander U.S. European Command, my opposite number was General Mattis, who went on to become, of course, our Secretary of Defense quite recently. General Mattis and I maintained very open communication about the relationship with Turkey, because everything that I did would ultimately impact his work. So in today's environment, I know both of those officers quite well. General Todd Walters is the officer at EUCOM Stuttgart, also Supreme Allied Commander, and General Frank McKenzie, a US Marine, is in Tampa. The two of them are in excellent conversation. I know that for a fact, and there is no disagreement, of which I am aware at least, about the role of Turkey. I don't know this, but my guess would be that both of them would echo many of the broad comments that I've made. Both of them would like to resolve the S-400 issue, for example, because it impacts the other ways in which the United States and Turkey and NATO and Turkey are working together. So bottom line, it's a bit of a complicated command structure. The key individual is General Walters, my successor in Stuttgart and in Mons. And as far as I can see, those two are in good communication about this situation. And I think both of them would be favorably inclined to make progress on this S-400 issue. Last comment, within the NATO alliance, the three-star US American general, who is the head of the Land Component Command in Izmir, is also someone I know, and he is quite optimistic about relationships and feels very well supported in his role as a NATO Land Component Commander in Izmir.
Thank you very much, Admiral. Professor Demir, a question about F-35. So it is, you know, like within this question, there will be multiple questions. What is the state of F-35, Turkey-US relation and F-35 right now? We heard that the supply chain at least will continue. However, what is the state of Turkey's status in F-35? And there has been debates in Washington, D.C. that especially Turkey's F-16s fleet are getting older, and if Turkey will not receive F-35s, and considering that FX Turkey's own jet fighter wouldn't be ready by 2023, Turkey would have some problems in terms of jet fighters. What would you say about that?
We see F-35 issue in twofold. One is the partnership. The other one is acquiring the planes. And from US actions, what we are really confused and really shocked in a sense that, okay, you may have some concerns about giving F-35s to Turkey and letting it fly in Turkish airspace and express concerns, etc. And although we have not talked about the technical details of these concerns yet, and we are open to discussion. But on the other hand, the partnership, I mean, it is very, very difficult for us to understand that we are in the program, we are the partner, we are one of the partners. And in entire program, we really play our role perfectly. And from every partner's perspective and JPO's own expressions and comments, that Turkish industry is really doing perfect, is a perfect partner. And in terms of cost and performance and quality, and there's nothing to complain. And what on earth is making them to decide that Turkey should be kicked out of the program, except a stand that Turkey should be punished? It's a kind of hostile step. There is no explanation. I mean, what we read, how we read this is, okay, since buying S-400, they must be punished. But the punishment is not to Turkey only, to the entire program and program partners, and from their own expression from US side, and the program will suffer at least $500 to $600 million extra cost. And when we look at our calculations, for each aircraft, there will be between $7, $8, or $9 million extra cost. What is the reason for this? And to punish Turkey? Okay, and then the entire program suffers. What is the logic behind it? And we would never understand this. And we are not able to understand, we are not able to comprehend this, and there's no logic. There's no really reasoning that really convince anybody. But still there, I mean, we cannot do, but despite of all these things, we always stated that we are committed to be a partner in the program. Although US side announced that they will stop orders from Turkey, we have not announced that in last year that we, since they are taking this action, we just would like to immediately stop all the production. We did not say this, and we will not say. Still, as long as the orders come, and we'll continue to produce the parts, our industry would like to participate in the program, would like to continue. Even if US side decided, let's say in 1 year, they will stop. And we are not trying to stop it now so that program will suffer more. And it is amazingly, some third countries right now are contacting to our companies over here, and they're asking the same parts. That means while US decides to stop procurement from Turkey, and they engage the third countries, but those third countries are not capable right now to really produce those parts, and they're asking us to sell them, then they will sell to the US. It's so funny. You know, this we cannot understand. Let's go to Turkish Air Force and the units. So we'll continue our own national fighter program, and definitely this program will go on. And we know that it's a challenging program. We know that there are a lot of challenges we have to do. We have to work a lot. And F-16 fleet, okay, it's aging, but there are so many remedies that we can really prolong their life. It is one of the options. And we are currently working on our own upgrades of F-16s. In the meantime, our national program will start having fruits 2023. We do not claim that it will fly, but we'll definitely see the aircraft coming out of the hangar. We will start ground tests, etc. And by the end of 2025 or 2026, we expect to see the first flight, but that flight will be with some products coming from different sources. And in the meantime, we'll continue our own jet engine program, other components. So we are learning these in the hard way, and we trust that we have a really dynamic and hardworking youth and human resources. We'll continue on this. And we have a saying in Turkish that bad neighbor make your own things. So we'll start owning our own things. But at the end of the day, it's not going to benefit to either party. And we always believe in collaboration, good spirit of collaboration and cooperation that will be benefiting to both parties. And if we continue on this path, both sides will see some harm. It's not only one-sided thing. And then why should we do this? But if one side that they will continue on whatever they're doing right now, we don't have any other option. We'll go, and believe me, we are not going to suffer at the end of the day. We'll succeed.
Thank you very much. Admiral, there is a question for you. Given the greater involvement of Russia in Syria and Libya, specifically Eastern Mediterranean area, do you think US-Turkey interests and relations will become more aligned, even though US obviously seems to be more focused on containing China's expansion in the world, specifically in South China?
Well, that's a big question. It covers a lot of ground. Let me let me start by saying, in terms of U.S.-China relationship, I think that is going to be the centerpiece of 21st century geopolitics. And how that relationship unfolds is unclear at the moment. U.S. and China have enormous tension. The U.S. and Turkey, we have some tactical disagreements. China and the U.S. are on opposite paths and have significant tension. And the tension between the U.S. and China includes the South China Sea, which China claims it's in its entirety, cyber activity going both ways, frankly, trade and tariff imbalances, a perception of unfair trade activity on both sides, and a number of human rights issues. So there are a big tension between the US and China. I think that'll be the main direction of international relations going forward in this 21st century. This makes it all the more important, in my view, that the United States hold its current allies close, because the greatest advantage the United States has in any competition with China is its alliance structures, being part of NATO, being close to our partners in Asia, like Australia, New Zealand, South Korea, Japan, Singapore, the Philippines, Thailand. The US has a global set of allies, and if we want to compete effectively with China, we're going to have to hold them close. So this, to me, is another argument for why the United States should be working to resolve this disagreement upon which we spent so much time this morning, the F-400 J-35 piece, F-35, please. So that's the China part of the question. In terms of Russia, we ought to take a step back here as we look at Russia, in my view. Russia, in many ways, is no longer a great power. It is certainly not a superpower. It has a population that is rapidly declining. By the middle of this century, Turkey will have more people than Russia does. It is largely depopulated to the east of the Ural Mountains. Its economy is not terribly effective. It's under significant sanctions for invading Ukraine. And it has many medical problems in its population. Russia has many challenges. Vladimir Putin, I think, has a very bad hand of cards, we would say, if he was a poker player or a bridge player. He doesn't have a lot of assets, but he's a smart poker player. He is playing this bad hand of cards very well. And so what he is trying to do is create a perception of Russian influence and activity around the world. This is why he is so engaged in the Middle East. He wants to show the world that he can be a strong deal maker, for example, in Syria, where he supports Bashar al-Assad, who, in my view, is a war criminal. And he also, Vladimir Putin, is getting closer and closer to Iran. So you see Putin operating, I think, cleverly throughout the region. Now, you ask about the Eastern Mediterranean. Yes, you will see Putin continue to be very engaged. He'll operate Russian naval vessels throughout that region. He'll use bases in Syria. He will continue to operate in and out of the Black Sea, and particularly now that Russia has occupied Ukraine and he has control of the major ports of Ukraine, you'll see him consolidate all that in a maritime basis. So bottom line, Russia is certainly no friend to the United States. Vladimir Putin has made clear his dislike and disdain of the United States. You're going to see continuing tension between the US and Russia, in my view. You'll also see Russia, going back to the beginning of the question, draw closer to China. You're seeing the two of them coming closer and closer together. In my view, all of this, as I said about China, is a strong argument for the US to work to resolve the challenges, the tactical challenges we have with Turkey, because let's be honest here, a Turkish-Russian relationship that expands can be something that would be of real concern. I'll close by saying, because we haven't mentioned Libya, it is ironic, if you will, in light of what I've just said, that in Libya, we see Turkey and Russia on opposite sides of that civil war. So there are certainly places of tension and pressure between Turkey and Russia, just as there are between Turkey and the United States. We in the United States would be wise, in my view, to work to consolidate our friendship with Turkey and solve the problems we've talked about today.
Admiral, there is a follow-up question from another of our followers. What is your comment on a possible escalation between Egypt, Turkey, and Russian expansion in Eastern Mediterranean?
I think it's high, unfortunately. And just in recent days, you've seen President Sisi establishing what he is calling red lines. He, of course, is part of working with General Haftar and his side of this equation. On the other side, you see Turkey working with the Government of National Unity in the capital. There's a lot of tension in the mix right now. I think it is a good thing that General Haftar's assault on the capital was rejected. He's been pushed back. I think it opens an opportunity for negotiation. Certainly, all of us have an interest in solving the problems in Libya. It's a country that could be a very positive place. It has resources, an educated population, relatively small population. I think that it is unfortunate that there are great power competition here. This is one, by the way, where the United States is not particularly involved. It is one where I could see the United States playing a constructive role, trying to bring the sides together. We do not need more tension and military activity in Libya. I don't think there's a military solution there.
Thank you very much. Professor Demir, from Washington, D.C., there are two perceptions in regards to Turkey's defense industry. On the one hand, some analysts are looking at one of the brightest spots in Turkey, the development of defense industry, increasing self-reliance in some of the cross-border operations. On the other hand, there are some, in quote, concerns that this autonomy may turn into an isolation of Turkey in defense industry, that Turkey's defense industry may cease international cooperation or in the process of doing so. What would be your response for that?
Yeah, our self-sufficiency comes from lessons learned and in the past, even today. So what I say on this is we are particularly giving importance to strategic products and systems that we must be independent on them. And in this global system, it is very natural that there will be a lot of relations, a lot of subcontractors, and on supply chain can use many international companies. However, it is a lesson that we have learned in the hard way and still learning that you cannot be dependent on others in critical and strategic items. And if I give you the list of the items that some of our allied countries are stopping those products or systems and they're not sending, they are blocking, there are hundreds of them. Why? And because Turkey is trying to protect its own national interest. And we are always open to dialogue on any front. And if you look at what happened in Syria, and openly there is a terrorist organization, and they've been supported on in different formats, under whatever name or whatever flag they are under, doesn't matter for us. We know who they are, and we are very sad that our allies are supporting them. And in long run, in long strategy, it will not help them even, and it will not help to stabilize the region. it will not help to really solve the humanitarian crisis. It will not help to protect NATO alliance and NATO's interest in. Because if you let your adversaries to put step on some soil, either in Syria or Libya, and the policies would open some gates to this, and it will, in the long run, hurt NATO alliance. And the policies over there we couldn't understand, and whatever we say, I guess it hasn't been understood. So this self-reliance will not isolate, will be still open to the world in terms of import and export. But our important point is the strategic items, that we know that the friendly nations, so-called, or so-called allies, will not give those systems, those products to us, and they are not given us right now. And then we have to really do our own homework and be self-reliant. It doesn't mean at all that we will be isolating ourselves, but this is the path that we will be following. It is also some steps in R&D and technology that it will be beneficial in the long run to our nation, not only in defense industry, also in other industrial areas. We have a young and dynamic population. When they are led correctly to technology and R&D, they will succeed in many fronts. And technology has a broader meaning in general. It will not only support defense industry, and a country's security and safety depends on not only the weapons and etc. It will depend on many things in technology, in society's needs, and so when you think this broad, any advancement in technology and R&D will help our nation in the long run. Of course, we'll always value international collaboration, and we are not for isolation at all.
Professor Demir, there is another question related to that. It says, dear President, how to bring more autonomy to Turkey's military industry without being trapped by a licensed system, which makes it depend from abroad? So you partly answered that question. Is there any steps that Turkey is taking to resolve these license system with the countries, with the allied countries?
Oh, I mean, if there's something depending on licensing, that's what I've been telling, that we are blocked. And in many cases, some of them hidden, some of them open. Many allies block us in many products, and then we go ahead and do our own things, develop our own products, and then trying to be self-reliant. So we are not in a process of bridging any license or any patent, etc. We are doing our own things. So I don't see any problem. And in licensing issue, if there's a signed agreement in license and things, we work accordingly. We will not be in breach of any agreement or any signature. We'll honor any agreement, any signature. But if the other side is behaving differently, of course, we have to choose our own path.
Thank you very much. We are almost done, but I have so many questions in front of me. Allow me one last question for each of our panelists. Admiral, there is a question, and it's a long question, but the end of it is about the Black Sea. So we have been talking about Eastern Mediterranean a lot, and the question is, how can the US and Turkey cooperate more effectively to enhance Black Sea security?
Well, in one word, it's NATO. I mean, this is a region that has NATO partners around it, as in alliance members, Romania, Bulgaria, but of course, Turkey, above all, has the longest coastline. And I think maritime exercises working together in that region are very powerful and important. And we should remember that Georgia and Ukraine are not members of the NATO alliance, but they're both strong and capable partners to the alliance who have participated in Afghanistan and on many other missions. So I think it's a region like the Arctic Ocean where Russia is present, NATO nations are present, and the best way to facilitate US-Turkish cooperation in the Black Sea is through the NATO alliance.
Thank you very much. And one last question for you, Professor Demir. Yesterday was the 4th anniversary of July 15 coup attempt in Turkey. And in Washington and many Western capitals, there were a lot of questions about the defense capability of Turkey in the aftermath of the coup attempt. And part of that discussion was about the defense industry. The question is, how did the failed July 15 coup attempt impact Turkish defense industry and capabilities? Do you think it created an interruption or delay, or was it already prepared for any kind of intervention, such as a coup attempt, etc.?
As it has been seen in active operations since July 15 coup attempt, Turkish military is effectively on the field and performing operations successfully. And that is a sign that it had increased the capabilities, because when the, let's say, blockage is cleaned in different lines of communications and command and control and all these, and we can proceed better. And in defense industry, of course, cleaning up the leftovers or those who had bad intention about entire well-being of the country, when they are isolated, and we become a better performing industry. Not only Turkish military became a better performing party, the Turkish defense industry started being a better performing industry, because what we felt, those people were blocking in some critical steps. And so after that, we started realizing that the reason in some of the steps that were hard to take because of them. So in short, one might think that putting some people out of the system will weaken it, but on the contrary, it increased our speed and also dedication of the entire human resources or workers or engineers in the industry. We have seen an increased dedication and also support in creating better products, better industry. So in short, yeah, we are stronger today.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you very much, Admiral. It was a really good conversation about the defense cooperation between two countries. And I'm glad that we had this optimistic, cautious optimistic note about the future trajectory of two countries. I know that there are so many questions. I apologize from the attendees and those who follow us on social media that I couldn't address, but hopefully if the busy schedules of these two gentlemen will allow, we will have them again in the near future to address those questions. Thank you again, gentlemen, and thank you for the audience.
Yeah, thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.